The knife was smaller than she expected. That was the first thing Kyle noticed when she unwrapped it from the cloth her handler had given her 3 days ago in a back room that smelled of damp wool and old smoke. She had expected something impressive, something that matched the weight of what she was being asked to do. Instead, it was a thin blade, barely longer than her palm, with a handle wrapped in cracked leather that someone had repaired badly with twine. It would have to be enough. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the servants' quarter she had been assigned to and turned the blade slowly in her fingers. Outside the window, the northern capital spread across the mountain in tiers of pale stone and torchlight. And somewhere above her, 3 floors up and behind walls thick enough to swallow sound, the Alpha King slept. Or didn't sleep. She had been told he rarely did. Her name was Kyle. Not the name she had been born with. That name had died with her village 6 years ago, along with everyone in it. Kyle was the name her handler had given her when she was 17 and hollow-eyed and willing to do anything to stop being hungry. It was a good name for what she had become. Short, hard, easy to forget. She was 23 now, and she had done 9 jobs in 6 years, and she had never once been afraid before walking into one. She was afraid now. She told herself it was the cold. The northern mountains had a specific kind of cold that wasn't just temperature. It was pressure. The weight of altitude sitting on your chest like a hand. She had grown up in the eastern lowlands where the air was wet and warm and smelled of river mud, and this dry, thin, knife-edged cold was something her body didn't understand yet. That was what she told herself. She rewrapped the blade and tucked it under the thin mattress and lay back and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the palace settling into night. Distant footsteps. A door somewhere. The low sound of wind finding gaps in old stone. She had been inside the northern fortress for 4 days, working as a kitchen runner, which meant she carried things from one place to another and kept her eyes down and her mouth shut and learned the rhythms of the place. When the guard shifts changed. Which corridors were empty at which hours. Where the Alpha King moved during the day, the great hall in the mornings for council, the training yard at midday, the upper library in the evenings. The library was the gap. He went alone. His guards waited outside the door. Her handler had told her this, and she had confirmed it herself by finding a servant's passage that ran behind the library's north wall, close enough that she could hear when someone moved inside. Tomorrow evening. That was the window. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep and lay awake for 3 hours instead. The kitchen started before dawn, and Kale was there, moving between the prep tables and the hearths with the focused blankness that had kept her alive through 9 jobs. She carried, she fetched, she refilled water pitchers. She swept ash from the smaller cooking hearth and replaced it with fresh wood. And she watched, the way she always watched, from behind eyes that gave nothing away. It was a skill. The emptiness. She had learned it early, not as a trained assassin trick, but as a child's survival mechanism, the particular stillness of a person who has learned that being noticed is dangerous. Her handler had recognized it when he found her and said it was the most valuable thing she had. Better than her speed, better than her aim. Better than the cold precision she had developed over years of difficult work. "You look like nobody," he had said. "That is everything." She was carrying a tray of bread through the upper corridor when she saw the Alpha King for the first time. She had expected him to look powerful. She had not expected him to look tired. He was walking with 2 of his commanders, and he was half a head taller than both of them, broad through the shoulders in the way of men who have been doing hard physical work since they were old enough to lift something. His hair was dark, and his jaw was sharp, and his eyes, even at this distance, were the particular pale gold that all the stories described. But he was rubbing the back of his neck with one hand while one of his commanders spoke, and the gesture was so ordinary, so entirely human, that it stopped something in her chest for just a second. She kept walking, eyes down. Nobody. She was almost past them when he looked up. Not at her face, at her. She felt it before she saw it, some animal awareness of attention, the way the air changes when something large and predatory focuses. She kept her eyes on the floor and kept moving, and did not change her pace by a single beat, and the moment passed, and she turned the corner and stood with her back against the cool stone, and breathed slowly, until her heart stopped doing what it was doing. He had not seen anything. She was a kitchen runner with a tray of bread. She was nobody. She repeated this to herself several times. It helped less than it should have. That evening, she positioned herself in the servants' passage behind the library wall 2 hours before he was due to arrive, because her handler had drilled into her that early was the only acceptable approach to timing. She stood in the narrow dark with the small blade in her hand and the cold stone at her back, and listened to the palace. She heard him arrive. The door. The particular silence of someone settling into a room and becoming comfortable in it. A chair. Pages. She found the panel her handler had described and pressed it, and it gave inward, slow, and almost silent. The library was lit by a fire and 2 oil lamps on the reading table, and the Alpha King was sitting with a book, and he did not look up when the panel opened. He said, without lifting his eyes from the page, "I was wondering when you were going to come through that wall." She did not move. Every instruction she had ever been given said the same thing about moments like this if you are compromised. Create distance and exit. Do not engage. Do not speak. The job is over. Get out. Report back, and the handler decides what comes next. Her feet did not move. The Alpha King turned a page. He still had not looked at her. "There is a chair," he said, nodding toward the one across the reading table, "if you prefer not to stand in a doorway with a knife." Kael's hand tightened around the blade. Her exit was behind her, the panel still open, the passage still dark. She could be gone in 4 seconds. She had timed the route. She did not take it. What she did, and she would not be able to explain this later, not to herself, and certainly not to her handler, was step into the library and let the panel click shut behind her. The fire threw orange light across the floor. The room smelled of cedar and old paper and something else. Something that she couldn't name. The particular scent of a person who had been somewhere specific long enough to leave traces of themselves in the air. She stood 6 feet from the reading table and looked at the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territory, and said nothing. He set the book down, face down, open, the way someone does when they intend to come back to it. Then he looked at her, and she understood immediately what the stories had gotten wrong about his eyes. They were pale gold, yes, that part was accurate, but the stories made it sound decorative, like a wolf's eyes in the light, catching and reflecting. These eyes were not catching anything, they were looking at everything. The kind of attention that didn't miss. He looked at her the way she looked at rooms she was about to move through. All of it, at once, and quietly. "You are frightened," he said. It was not a question, and it was not unkind, and it was somehow worse than if it had been either. "No," she said. He tilted his head slightly. "I can smell it." She knew this about alphas in theory, the ability to read emotional states through scent, like reading weather. She had accounted for it in her planning, which was why she had spent 4 days in the kitchen surrounded by smoke and grease and the overlapping scents of 40 people, trying to make herself into something ambient and unreadable. It had clearly worked until this moment, which meant he had smelled her fear through the wall, before she had even opened the panel. This changed certain things about how tonight was going to go. "Fear is a physiological response," she said. "It doesn't mean anything about intent." Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. "You are a trained one." She said nothing. He leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms, and the firelight caught the edge of his jaw and the thin scar above his left eye, and he looked at her with that quiet, total attention. Where did they find you? That's not relevant. Who sent you? She was quiet. You are not going to tell me. No, he nodded, as if this was reasonable, as if this was a conversation between two people discussing something ordinary. She had walked into his library with a blade, with the specific intention of ending his life, and he was treating it like a mildly interesting interruption to his reading. This was not how this was supposed to go. She had done 9 jobs. She had never gotten to this point in any of them, the part where the target was awake and watching and aware. Her work had always been cleaner than that, faster, the specific mercy of not knowing. She had told herself this was the merciful part. The speed. Looking at him now, she understood that she had been telling herself this because it was easier than the alternative. He said, "Try again tomorrow." She blinked. What? You came here to do something. He picked the book back up. You are not going to do it tonight. You can see that. I can see that. So, he opened to the page he had been on. Try again tomorrow. You know where the panel is. The absolute strangeness of what he had just said took a moment to reach her completely. You are telling me to come back, she said slowly, and try to kill you again. I am telling you that you came here tonight and you did not do what you came to do, and we should both acknowledge that and not pretend otherwise. He turned a page. Whatever is stopping you will either resolve itself or it won't. If it does, you know where to find me. I am here most evenings. You are not afraid of me, she said. I didn't say that. You smelled fear. That was mine, not yours. He looked up from the book. I have been king for 11 years, he said. I have had 4 serious attempts on my life and 7 that were not serious at all. I learned a long time ago that being afraid of people who want to kill me doesn't change whether they do it. What changes it is understanding what they want more than they want to do the job. He paused. Tonight. Whatever that is, it's stronger than your training. She stood in the firelit library with a blade she hadn't raised and looked at the man she had come here to kill and felt, with a clarity that frightened her more than anything else had tonight, that he was correct. I won't come back, she said. All right. She found the panel and went back into the dark passage and stood there for a long time with her back against the wall and her heart doing something uneven and strange, listening to the sound of a page turning on the other side. She came back the next night. She told herself it was to finish the job. This was not entirely a lie. There was still an objective, still a handler expecting a report, still a very small and practical part of her brain that understood that failing to complete an assignment had consequences she was familiar with and preferred to avoid. She climbed into the servants' passage at the same hour and stood in the dark and listened and heard the familiar sounds of someone settling into the library, the chair, the pages. She pressed the panel. He did not look up this time either. He had a different book. I did not think you would come back, he said. I told you I wouldn't. You did. He turned a page. That chair is still there. She looked at the chair. It was a plain thing, solid dark wood, with no cushion, the kind of chair that furnishes a room because rooms need chairs, not because anyone thought carefully about comfort. She had been standing for the better part of 2 hours in a narrow stone passage. She sat down. The fire was lower than the night before, the room a degree or 2 cooler, and the lamps on the table cast a circle of warm light that made everything outside it feel very far away. The Alpha King read. She sat in the chair across from him and did not move, and the silence between them was strange because it wasn't uncomfortable, and an uncomfortable silence was the only kind she knew. After a while, he said, without looking up, Are you planning to read something, or just sit there? I'm deciding whether to kill you. You have been deciding that since yesterday evening. He turned another page. You are a slow decider. I'm thorough. Something changed in the corner of his mouth. There are books on the shelf behind you. The ones on the right half are more interesting. She did not turn around. She looked at him across the reading table instead, at the way the lamplight sat on the sharp angles of his face, at the particular stillness he had that was different from her stillness. Her stillness was trained, a thing she had built deliberately over years. His felt like it had always been there, a natural depth, the stillness of something large and old that did not need to announce itself. How did you know I was in the passage last night? She said, before I opened the panel. He set the book down properly this time, not face down open but closed with his thumb holding the page. Your breathing changed when you found the right panel. Through the stone. I have very good hearing. That should not be possible. And yet, he opened the book again. She thought about this. She thought about the fact that he had known she was there, known she was afraid, known she was not going to do anything, and had still sat calmly in his chair and read his book. She thought about what kind of person that required you to be. You were not worried, she said. I was a little worried. You didn't act worried. Acting worried would not have helped either of us. He paused on a page. If you had come through that wall with real intent, worry would not have been fast enough. And if you came through the wall the way you did, with that much fear and that much hesitation, then worry was unnecessary. Either way, it adds nothing. She sat with this. That is an unusual way to be, she said finally. Probably, he glanced up briefly. What is your name? She nearly said Kyle before she caught herself. It was the name she used, but for reasons she did not examine directly in that moment, she did not want to use it here. She did not want to give him the name her handler had given her, the name that belonged to the version of herself that was sitting in this chair for professional reasons. Kyle, she said, because she had no other name that was still hers. He repeated it once, not tasting it, not with any particular weight, just confirming that he had it. I'm Reese. She knew his name. She had known it before she arrived, had read everything her handler had assembled on him, the political history and the pack alliances, and the military record and the personal details that intelligence work always surfaced, the small human facts that made a target into a person if you let them. His name was Reese Devon, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, 11 years on the throne. Took it at 20 after his father was killed in a border conflict. No Luna, no known mates. She had read all of this and it had been information. Hearing him say it to her across a reading table felt like something different. I know your name, she said. I assumed. He went back to his book. You came here knowing everything about me, and I know almost nothing about you. That is a significant imbalance. That's how my work operates. What would balance it look like? She looked at him. Why do you want balance? He was quiet for a moment, reading a line she couldn't see. Then he said, because you are going to come back here again tomorrow night, and probably the night after, and eventually we are going to have to be honest about what this is. And it will be easier if we are not complete strangers by then. The directness of it stopped her. She had been in rooms with very powerful people before. It was unavoidable in her work. And powerful people, in her experience, spoke in a particular way. They made space for themselves by crowding others. They said things that required you to arrange your understanding to accommodate them. They used language as weight. Reese said things the way someone places objects on a table, simply and where they could be seen. I am not coming back after tomorrow, she said. He turned a page. She stayed for another hour, sitting in the wooden chair in the lamplight, with her blade in her pocket and the fire burning lower, and he read his book. And the silence between them was the same strange, undemanding thing it had been before. When she left, she used the main door instead of the panel. He did not comment on this. She came back. She told herself each time that it was the last time, and each time the evening arrived and she found herself in the passage or already at the library door without entirely remembering deciding to go. It was the most alarming thing that had happened to her in 6 years, and she did not know what to do with it, so she did what she had always done with things she did not know what to do with. She kept moving and didn't examine it directly. On the 4th night, he had a second cup on the table. Small, ceramic already poured. She sat down and looked at it. "It's tea," he said. "It's not poisoned. Poisoning an assassin feels unsporting." She picked it up and drank it because she was cold and the tea was hot, and she was tired of performing caution in a situation that had stopped making conventional sense several nights ago. It was good tea, something dark and slightly bitter with a warmth that lasted. "Tell me something true," he said, not looking up from his book. "About what? Anything. I don't require it to be relevant." She thought for a moment. "I grew up near a river, the eastern lowlands. There was a particular smell in summer when the water was low and the mud dried in the sun." She paused. "I have not smelled anything like it since I left." He looked up then, not with surprise, but with the particular attention he gave things that interested him. "How old were you when you left?" 17, by choice. It wasn't a question, but she answered it anyway. "No." He held her gaze for a moment and then went back to his book, and she understood that he was not going to ask the next question, that he was leaving space for her to fill if she chose, and emptiness if she didn't. She did not fill it, but she noticed that he had left it. On the 5th night she asked him something she had been turning over for days. "Why haven't you had me arrested?" He considered this with the same seriousness he gave everything. "Because you have not done anything that requires arresting. I came here to kill you. You came here and then you didn't. That is a different thing." He set his book down. "I have had people arrested for intent before. It is a messy business and it makes people very determined in ways they were not before." He looked at her steadily. "Also, you are more interesting than most of the people I speak to in a given day, and I am reluctant to lose that." She stared at him. "I am an assassin sent to end your life. Yes, and you keep coming back to sit in a chair and drink tea instead. I find that genuinely compelling." She did not know what to say to this, and so she said nothing, which was her default in situations that exceeded her frameworks, and he picked his book back up and the evening continued. But something had shifted, and they both knew it. On the 6th night, she asked who had trained her. She told him enough, not everything, the outline of it, the handler, the years, the work that had no other name in her mind except work. He listened without interrupting, which was not something most people were capable of. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to still be doing this in 10 years?" he asked. The question landed somewhere unexpected. She had not been asked what she wanted in so long that the question itself felt strange, like a word in a language she used to speak. "I have not thought about 10 years, she said. "What about 5? "I don't do 5 either. How far ahead do you think?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Sometimes the day after." He looked at her across the table, and something in his expression was careful, the way you are careful with something that is both fragile and sharp. "That is not a life," he said quietly. "That is a series of days." She put her cup down. "For some people that is the same thing. Is it the same thing for you?" She did not answer. She looked at the fire instead, at the way the coals had settled into a steady orange glow without much flame, the kind of fire that would last through the night without needing attention. Reliable, quiet, she thought about the eastern lowlands, the smell of the river in summer, the particular quality of light in the mornings when the mist came off the water and everything was soft and gray before the sun burned through. She thought about the fact that she could picture all of this with absolute clarity, and that she had not allowed herself to think about it in years because thinking about it was a kind of pain she had no use for. "No," she said, "it is not the same thing." He didn't respond immediately. He sat with her answer in the way he sat with everything, giving it weight and room and not rushing toward the next thing. Outside the library, the palace was settling into its late-night stillness. She could hear nothing from the corridors. "There are other ways to be useful," he said finally. "If that is what you need, to be useful. I don't know how to do anything else. You know how to read people. You know how to move through spaces without being noticed. You know how to gather information and hold it and use it at the correct moment." He paused. "These are not assassin skills specifically. They are skills that belong to you." She looked at him. He was reading again, or making the motion of reading, and she had learned in 6 evenings that these were not always the same thing. Sometimes he looked at a page and thought about something else entirely. She could tell by the specific quality of his stillness. "Why are you doing this?" she said. He turned a page. "What specifically?" "This. The tea." The questions, she gestured slightly, encompassing the room, the evenings, the impossible normality of it. "Whatever this is." He looked up. "Because you came here to do something and you couldn't, and that means there is a part of you that didn't want to, and I am interested in that part." He held her gaze. "I have not been interested in something in quite a while." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the palace a door closed. She picked up her cup and finished the tea and set it down, and she did not say anything else that night, but when she left she went again through the main door. On the 7th night she told him about her village. She had not planned to. She had not told anyone about it, not in 6 years, not her handler, not the people she had occasionally worked alongside, not the woman who ran the boarding house in the eastern city where she sometimes stayed between jobs and who made good soup and asked no questions. The information lived in her the way scar tissue lives, present, functional, not requiring attention. She told him because he asked her a small and ordinary question about whether she had siblings, and the answer to that question required context. And before she understood what she was doing, the context was coming out of her in short, plain sentences that did not ask for anything in particular. Not sympathy, not a response, just somewhere to exist outside of her. For a few minutes. She had 2 brothers. Younger, the older one had their mother's eyes and a habit of laughing at things that weren't funny yet, before the joke arrived. As if he could hear it coming. The younger one was serious and small and collected things, flat, smooth river stones and bird feathers and once a piece of blue glass that had probably been a bottle at some point. The pack that came through her village was not local. That was the part that had made no sense at the time, and still made no sense now if she looked at it directly, which she generally tried not to do. The local packs had agreements. Her village was under the protection of the Myron Pack, and the Myron Pack had held that territory peacefully for 40 years. The pack that came through was something else, something with no markings she recognized, following orders she never learned the origin of. She had been in the river meadow when it started. She heard the sounds before she saw anything, and she stood in knee-deep water with her shoes in one hand and understood, with the specific clarity of someone whose body knows things before their mind does, that she should not go back. She didn't go back. She stood in the water until it was dark, and then she walked east and kept walking. When she finished, the library was very quiet. The fire had settled. Reese was looking at the table in front of him, not at her, giving her the space of not being watched. After a moment, he said, "How long did you walk?" 9 days, until I reached the city. Alone, yes. He was quiet for another moment. The people who did this, do you know who they were? No. I have tried to find out. 6 years of work that puts you in proximity to information, and I have not been able to identify them. He looked up then. His pale gold eyes were steady. I might be able to help with that. She looked at him. Why would you? Because you deserve to know. The simplicity of it sat in the air between them. She had braced for something more complicated in offer with conditions. A trade, the kind of exchange that people with power made when they wanted something from people without it. What he said instead was 4 words that didn't ask for anything. She looked away. She pressed her thumbnail against the ceramic edge of the cup and felt the slight rough texture of the glaze. I am still technically here to kill you, she said. I know. You are helping me anyway. Yes, why? He considered this for a moment. Because being afraid of what you might do is less interesting than finding out what you will do instead. He picked up his book and then set it down again. Also, if I have the information you've been looking for, and I choose not to give it to you because of why you arrived here, I am the kind of person who uses what someone needs as a mechanism of control. I don't want to be that person. She sat with this. She had spent 6 years being used as a mechanism of someone else's control, and she had told herself this was simply the structure of her world, that it was neither good nor bad, but simply the arrangement of things. The way weather is an arrangement of things. You didn't judge it. You adapted. Looking at Reese across the library table, she understood for the first time that she had been wrong about this, that she had decided to be wrong about it, because the alternative understanding that she was in a situation that should not have existed required too much energy she couldn't afford. My handler reports to someone, she said. I don't know who. The chain is long and deliberately obscured. I can start further down the chain and work up. It could take a long time. I have resources. He said this without pride, simply as a fact about his situation, the way you'd note that you had a window or a door. And I suspect the answer connects to things I already need to know. These requests don't originate from nowhere. She nodded slowly. If you find something, I will tell you, directly, not through intermediaries. She looked at him. You trust me with information. Still, after all of this. He met her eyes. You have been in this library 7 nights with a blade, and you have not raised it once. I think we are past the point where trust needs to be negotiated carefully. Outside, the night was deep and the wind had found new gaps in the stone, slightly different sounds than the evenings before. She thought about her brothers, the one who laughed early and the one who collected smooth stones. She thought about the way the river had felt in summer, cold around her ankles and the light on the water. Tell me something true, she said, turning his question from the first night back to him. He didn't hesitate. I am the most powerful alpha in this territory, and I am also the loneliest person in most rooms I walk into. I have been trying to decide for 11 years whether those 2 things are connected or just coincidental. She looked at him for a long time. They are connected, she said. He nodded once, slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. The fire burned low. Neither of them moved to add wood. The handler came on the 8th day. Not in person, he never came in person, which was one of his consistent qualities and one she had once considered professional and now considered cowardly. He sent a message through the secondary route they used, a small folded paper left in the hollow of a specific loose stone in the lower market corridor, which she was expected to check every 3 days. She had been checking it every day. The message was 6 words. Status. Confirm completion or explain delay. She stood in the lower corridor with the paper in her hand and the stone in the other and looked at neither of them. Around her, the market was moving through its midday business. Voices and footsteps and the smell of bread and something being cooked with too much salt. Someone's child ran past her with a wooden toy. She put the paper in her pocket and went back to work. She did not write a response. She thought about this choice carefully, which was itself new because the work had never involved choices the way she was thinking about choices now. The work had involved decisions, which were different, fast, functional, requiring no particular examination. Turn left or right. Use this route or that one. Wait or move. These were questions with correct answers that you identified and executed. What she was doing now was not a decision. It was something slower and more structural, the kind of thing that rearranged what came after it. That evening, Reese was already in the library when she arrived, which was unusual. He was standing at the window instead of sitting at the table, looking out at the city below, and he turned when she came through the door, and something in his expression shifted slightly in a way she had learned to read over 8 evenings. It was the expression he had when something had been sitting with him for a while. "My intelligence people flagged something," he said. She stopped. "Related to me. Related to who sent you." He moved back to the table but didn't sit. "There is a merchant consortium operating through the border territories. 3 families, old money, territorial grievances going back to my grandfather's time. They lost a significant land grant when I restructured the northern trade routes 2 years ago." He looked at her steadily. "They have been funding a private network. I think your handler is paid through it." She took this in. "You found this in 8 days. My people have been looking at this network for other reasons. Your situation added a specific thread to pull." He paused. "The 3 families are the Voss Karen Group, the Aldrich Trading House, and a smaller family called Brennan that operates mostly in the Eastern Lowlands." The Eastern Lowlands. She felt something go very still in her chest. "The Brennan family," she said carefully. "Where specifically in the Eastern Lowlands?" Reese looked at her. She watched him understand. She watched him connect the thing he had just said to the thing she had told him 2 nights ago, and she watched something move through his expression that she recognized as anger, the contained, specific kind that does not perform itself. "The river villages," he said quietly. "Lower Eastern Territory." She put her hand flat on the reading table, not to steady herself, just to feel something solid. "They cleared the land for a development route," she continued, and she was surprised by how even her voice was. "The villages were in the way. They paid someone to make that not be a problem. That is what I believe. And 6 years later they hired my handler to remove an obstacle to their trade interests." She paused. "Through me. The person they made." The thing she felt in that moment was not what she expected. She had imagined, in the abstract, what it would feel like to find this out. She had assumed it would be rage, the clean, consuming kind that gives you something to do with your hands. What she felt instead was something quieter and more complicated. A kind of structural collapse in slow motion, the understanding that the shape of her life for 6 years had been built by the same people who had ended the first part of it. Reese did not say anything. He did not move toward her or offer something or try to fill the silence. He just stood across the table and was present in the particular way he had, which was to say completely, without dividing his attention anywhere else. After a long moment she said, "What do you do with this information?" "That depends on what you want. I want them to be held responsible. Then, that is what we work toward." She looked at him. "You keep saying we." "Yes, why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because you came here alone, and you have been alone for a long time, and I have resources and information and standing, and there is no reasonable argument for why those things should stay on my side of this table." She looked at the table between them. It was a plain table, old wood, dark with age and use, with a small scar near one edge that might have been a burn or might have been something else. An ordinary table in a library where an assassin had been having tea with the man she had come to kill for 8 nights. "If I help you bring them to account," she said slowly, "what does that make me? Here, in relation to you." Rice held her gaze. "What do you want it to make you?" It was the second time he had asked her what she wanted, and it landed the same way it had the first time, in a place that was not accustomed to being addressed. She looked at him across the scarred table, at the firelight on his face, at the pale gold eyes that had been looking at her with that total unhurried attention for 8 evenings, and she thought about what it felt like to sit in this room, with this person, drinking tea and being asked questions that assumed she had answers worth hearing. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "That's fine," he said. "You have time." She was not used to having time. She was not used to anything she was currently in the middle of, but this felt like the truest version of the unfamiliarity, the simple radical strangeness of someone who had all the power in a situation telling her that she could take her time with it. She sat down in her chair. He sat across from her. The fire gave out its steady, quiet heat. "Tell me about the Brennan family," she said. Everything. He opened a drawer in the reading table and pulled out a folded document. He had prepared this before she arrived, she realized. He had been standing at the window waiting for her to come. He put the document in front of her, and she leaned forward, and they began. She stopped checking the hollow stone. This was a line she understood clearly when she crossed it, unlike the earlier ones that had felt like gradual drift. Not checking the stone was a decision with a specific meaning. It said, "I am no longer operating within this arrangement." It said, "The job is over," and not because it was completed. It said something she was not ready to say directly, but was apparently willing to say through action, which had always been her more honest language anyway. The handler would send someone eventually. She knew this. She was not naive about the machinery she had been part of for 6 years, and she understood that people who ran networks like his did not simply absorb a missing operative as an acceptable loss and move forward. Someone would come. She had perhaps 2 weeks before that happened, possibly 3. She told Reese on the 9th night. He listened to the full shape of it, the timeline, the probable response, the options as she saw them. She had already mapped 3 exit routes from the palace and 2 from the city, old habit, the kind that didn't switch off. She told him these too. He listened to all of it and then said, "You are not leaving." She looked at him. "You do not get to decide that." "You are right." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I am not deciding it. I am disagreeing with the premise. You are thinking about this as if your best option is to run. I want you to think about whether there is a better option. Staying here makes me a problem for you. You are already a problem for me," he said. "You have been a problem for me since you came through that wall. I have found that I prefer having you as a problem to not having you here." She sat with the strange directness of this. He continued, "If your handler sends someone, I want to know about it. If there is a threat to you in this palace, I want to address it. These are not complicated positions. You are offering me protection. I am telling you that I have resources and I would like to use them in ways that are useful to you. If that reads as protection, then yes." She looked at the fire. "People will ask questions about who I am, why I am here. I have been thinking about that. And you were an intelligence operative who came in through unusual channels with information about a threat to the crown, which is true, in a specific light. She considered this. That is a very edited version of the truth. It omits certain details. He met her eyes. The essential facts are accurate. You are here. There is a threat. You have information about a consortium that hired me to kill you. Yes, which you chose not to do, and which you are now helping me to address." He paused. "The why behind your arrival matters to me. It does not need to matter to everyone." She thought about this for a while. The fire shifted and settled. Outside the window, the mountain city was dark, except for the scattered lights of the lower tiers. "What do you tell people I am?" she said. Someone I trust, he said simply. People here are accustomed to me trusting people they don't fully understand. I am known for it. Sarah, who is my head of intelligence, makes a face every time, but she has also been wrong about every person I have trusted in this way, so I consider her skepticism a good sign. Something moved through Kyle that she didn't immediately identify. It took her a moment to name it, not because she had never felt it, but because she had felt it so rarely and so long ago that it had lost its familiar shape. It was the feeling of being accounted for, of being factored into someone's thinking not as a variable or a risk, but as a person whose presence needed to be explained because their presence mattered. I came here to kill you, she said, one more time, as if she needed to make sure it remained on the table between them and didn't quietly disappear. You came here with that intent, he said. And then you made a different choice. And then you kept making it. For 9 nights. He looked at her steadily. People are not only what they came here to do. You know that better than most. She looked at him for a long time. If I stay, she said slowly, I need to be doing something. Useful, real. I cannot just exist here with no function. I have a significant intelligence gap in my current operation against this consortium. Someone who understands how these networks operate from the inside would be invaluable. You want me to help you bring down the people who hired me. I want you to help me bring down the people who destroyed your village and built you into a tool and then pointed you at me. He held her gaze. I think you want that too. She did. She wanted it with a clarity that surprised her, cutting through the years of deliberate not wanting things that had been its own kind of protection. I will need to move rooms, she said practically. My current quarters are a kitchen runner's closet. If I am doing intelligence work, I need access to different parts of the palace. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. I will speak to Sarah tomorrow. She will make a face. Definitely, he picked up his book and set it down again without opening it. There is one other thing. She waited. My council will ask questions eventually about who you are and what your standing is here. I can delay that, and Sarah can manage it for a while, but at some point there will need to be an answer that means something to them. He looked at her carefully. I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you that the question will arise, and I want you to know it is coming, so it does not arrive as a surprise. She understood what he was not suggesting. She understood it clearly, with all of its implications and its weight, and she did not look away from it. But she also did not reach for it, because it was enormous and she was still very much in the middle of reconfiguring everything else. One thing at a time, she said. Yes, he agreed. She reached for her cup. The tea had gone lukewarm, but she drank it anyway. Tell me what Sarah knows about the consortium's current operations, she said. He opened the drawer again. They worked until the fire went out. Sarah made a face. It was a specific face, controlled and brief, gone in under 2 seconds, but Kyle had spent 6 years reading people in very high-stakes conditions, and she caught every piece of it. The slight narrowing at the eyes, the small compression of the mouth, the barely there shift of weight that said I have concerns I am not going to voice right now, but will absolutely voice later when I have the king alone. Sarah was exactly what Kyle had expected from Rhys's description, and nothing like what she had imagined. Medium height, close-cropped silver hair, ink-stained fingers, eyes that inventoried a room the way Kyle inventoried rooms, quickly and with specific purpose. She smelled of leather and cold air and the particular dry smell of documents handled regularly. She looked at Kyle with the careful attention of someone who was very good at their job and was currently applying all of it. Unusual channels, Sarah said. Yes, Rhys said. How unusual. Very, a pause. Sarah looked at Kyle. What did you do before? Intelligence work, Kyle said. Private networks. Which ones? I am not going to tell you that yet. Sarah's eyes moved to Rhys. He said nothing. She looked back at Kyle. Another small assessment pause. Eastern Lowlands background, Sarah said. I can hear it in the consonants. Yes, the eastern lowlands are interesting to me right now. I know, Kale said. That's why I'm here. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. The skepticism was still there, but something else had joined it, not warmth exactly, but the professional recognition of someone who communicates efficiently. Sit down, Sarah said. Tell me what you know about the Brennan family's eastern operations. Kyle sat down and talked for 2 hours. She did not tell Sarah everything. She did not tell her how she had arrived here or what her original purpose was. She gave Sarah what was useful, the structure of the network as she understood it, the communication routes, the way the handler passed information and received assignments, the pattern of the jobs as she had experienced them over 6 years. She gave Sarah the bones of the thing, the architecture, leaving out the details that would require explaining too much too soon. Sarah wrote. She wrote a great deal, small tight script in the margins of existing documents and on new paper, and she asked precise questions that told Kyle exactly what she already knew and where her gaps were. It was like watching a very good craftsperson work. Kyle respected it genuinely. At the end of 2 hours, Sarah set her pen down and looked at Kyle with the expression of someone who has updated their assessment. You have been inside this network for 6 years, Sarah said. Yes, and you are now outside it. Yes, that is a significant shift. What caused it? Kyle was quiet for a moment. I found out who ultimately funds the operation. Sarah glanced at Reese. He was leaning against the wall near the window, arms crossed, watching, as he had been for the past 2 hours. He gave Sarah nothing with his expression. Sarah looked back at Kale. She was deciding something. Kale could see it, running a calculation that involved more variables than Kale had access to. We have been trying to build a case against the Brennan Consortium for 14 months, Sarah said finally. We have good documentation of the financial structure and the territorial violations. What we have not been able to establish is the operational layer. Who they hire, how, through what channels, for what specific purposes. She paused. You are the operational layer. I am one piece of it. You are a significant piece. Sarah tapped her pen against the table once, a decision sound. I will need specific documentation, routes, names where you have them, communication samples if possible. I can provide most of that. Most. There are things I do not know. I was kept deliberately limited. That is how these operations work. The people inside them know their own lane and nothing adjacent. Sarah nodded. This apparently matched what she already understood. The gaps in your knowledge are also useful. They tell us about the structure. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening. At some point food arrived, bread and something warm in a clay pot, and Kyle ate without looking up from the documents spread across the table, which was the most natural she had felt in a room with other people in 6 years, this particular absorption in work, the world outside narrowing to the task in front of her. When the light changed and the evening settled in, Sarah gathered her papers and looked at Kyle with an expression that was as close to approval as Kyle suspected the woman got. You will need proper quarters, Sarah said. Not the kitchen block. The king mentioned he would speak to you. He mentioned it this morning. I have already arranged it. A pause. There are rooms on the intelligence corridor. You will be near my people. I prefer to have people I am working with close enough to find easily. Kyle nodded. One more thing, Sarah said. She said it neutrally, with no particular weight, but Kyle heard the weight underneath it anyway. The king trusts you. I do not yet, but I am willing to extend provisional trust in the direction of your skills and the usefulness of your information. If those 2 things hold, we will revisit. She gathered the last of her papers. If they do not hold, I want you to understand that I am very good at my job, and I will find out. I understand, Kyle said. Sarah left. Reese pushed off the wall and came to the table. He looked at the documents she had spread across it, the map of the network she had drawn from memory, the names and routes and patterns. She likes you, he said. Kyle looked at him. She made the face. She makes the face with people she is going to trust eventually. She has a different face for people she is dismissing entirely. He picked up the edge of one of her documents, looking at the network map. This is very good. I have had 6 years to learn it. It will break the case open. He set the document down. Sarah has been working toward this for over a year. You have given her the layer she was missing. Kyle looked at the map she had drawn, the lines connecting names to names, the routes she had traveled, the cities and the hollow stones and the back rooms smelling of damp wool. The architecture of 6 years. It was not a good use of 6 years, she said. No, he did not soften this. But it was what they made it into. And now it becomes something else. She looked up at him. Something else, she repeated. He met her eyes. Yes, she looked back at the map, her own handwriting mapping the thing she was dismantling. There was something in this that she could not name precisely but felt clearly, a kind of rightness, the specific satisfaction of a thread being used for something other than what it was made for, something better, something that actually held. The handler sent someone on the 11th day. Sarah's people identified the operative before he was inside the city walls, which said something about how good Sarah's network was, and something else about how the handler had chosen someone less careful than the job required. Kyle had known operatives like this, people who were effective in controlled conditions and became visible when the conditions changed. They brought him to an interrogation room in the lower keep, and Sarah asked Kyle if she wanted to be present. She thought about it. Yes, she said. The operative was a man she had worked near twice, never directly with. He looked, in the context of a stone room with 2 of Reese's guards at the door, significantly less capable than he had in the context of a border city market where he had been comfortable and unobserved. He was frightened. She could read it in his posture, the way he held his shoulders, the very specific stillness of someone trying to appear still rather than actually being it. She knew this stillness. She had worn it. Sarah asked the questions. She was methodical and unhurried, moving through what she wanted to know in a sequence that appeared conversational and was entirely structured. The operative gave up what he knew faster than he should have, but Kyle had learned long ago that most people did. That the idea of holding information under pressure was much more solid than the reality, that silence was a skill most people had never been asked to develop. What he knew was limited. The handler kept his operatives lean on information, as Kyle had told Sarah. But the pieces he had, the contact route he used, the account he drew payment from, the name he knew his immediate contact by, these were the pieces that slid into the spaces in Sarah's documentation and completed things. When he was done, Sarah nodded to the guards and looked at Kyle. Anything you want to add? Kyle looked at the operative. He was looking back at her with an expression that had moved from fear to a complicated mix of fear and something like betrayal, which she found she could examine without flinching. She understood the feeling. She had felt it herself, briefly, on the morning she had understood what the consortium was. No, she said. You got what matters. Outside the room, Sarah said, the account he named routes through the Aldrich Trading House. That is the second family. We now have direct financial connection between all 3. Is it enough? Getting closer, Sarah walked quickly, the way she always moved, like a person whose time was always already in use. I need one more thing. The handler himself, or documentation that connects the Brennan family directly to the operational decisions. Not just funding. She paused at a corridor junction. Can you get me that? Kyle thought about it. The hollow stone, she said. If I send a response to his last message, something that makes him want to communicate in more detail. He is cautious over written communication, but there are things he will put down if he believes the situation requires it. What things? Authorization. If I tell him the delay is because the situation is more complex than anticipated, and I need explicit instruction to proceed, he will give it in writing because he does not want ambiguity in his network. She paused. He gives authorization in writing because it gives him control over the operative. If something goes wrong, the documentation exists. He has used it before to redirect blame. Sarah looked at her. You are describing your own vulnerability in this system. Yes, and you have documentation from previous jobs. Kyle was quiet for a moment, kept for my own protection, in case it was ever needed. Sarah's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. The calculation running behind them updated. Where? Not here. Stored outside the city. I can retrieve it. How long? 2 days, 3 at most. Sarah nodded. Go with 2 of my people. People you choose from the unit, so you know they are mine and not someone else's. All right. She left the next morning before dawn with 2 members of Sarah's intelligence unit, both of whom she had spent the preceding evening assessing carefully and found adequate, which was the word she used for people she considered reliable. She had not told Reese she was leaving until the night before, which she had been briefly uncertain about. This sense that she should tell him, that his knowing was something she wanted rather than just something that was logistically sensible. She told him in the library. He was reading. He closed the book when she explained. He listened to the plan without interrupting, asked 2 precise questions about the route and the security of the storage location, and when she had answered them, he said, "Come back." 2 words. Simply put, not a command. She came back in 2.5 days with a waterproof leather case that smelled of the dry storage unit she had rented under a name that connected to nothing. 3 cities east of the northern capital. The case contained 6 years of careful documentation, original written authorizations, payment records, communication samples, a ledger of jobs with dates and payment amounts, and the names her handler had used at various times, because she had known, always, in the specific way of a person who understands that the arrangement they are in is not a safe one, that she might need this someday. She gave it to Sarah without reading through it first. Sarah went through it for 4 hours, and then came to find Kyle in the new rooms on the intelligence corridor, which had a window and a desk and a bed that was not a closet, and stood in the doorway with an expression that was the most open Kyle had seen on her face. This closes it, Sarah said. Every gap, every missing connection. This documentation combined with what we already had is enough. She paused. More than enough. Good. Sarah looked at her for a moment. You kept this for 6 years. Yes, knowing that giving it to anyone was dangerous. Yes, why give it now? Kyle thought about the honest answer and gave it. Because I found something worth giving it for. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in a tone that was still professional, but had shed one layer of distance, "You are useful. And I mean that as the highest possible compliment." After she left, Kyle sat on the edge of the bed in the new room and looked at the window and the night sky beyond it and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, which was a word she had complicated feelings about, but something adjacent. The particular quality of being in the right place, doing the right thing, with the right people, for reasons that were her own. She thought about her brothers. She thought about the river. Then she went to find Reese. He was not in the library. She found him in the training yard, which she had not seen him use in the evenings before. The yard was empty except for him, lit by 2 torches at the far ends, and he was moving through a training sequence alone. The kind of work that was not about fighting a partner, but about maintaining the body's knowledge of itself. Deliberate and repetitive, each movement clean. She stood at the edge of the yard and watched. He moved differently here than he did in the library, which was not surprising, but was still interesting to observe. In the library he was still, contained, his physicality present but folded away. Here it was uncontained, fully used, and she understood with a specific clarity why the stories about him used the words they did. The descriptions of him as something more than ordinarily dangerous. He was large, and he was fast, and he moved with the economy of someone for whom violence was a skill acquired through necessity rather than preference. He stopped when he registered her presence, which took approximately 4 seconds after she arrived, which was good, she noted, because most people took longer. He looked at her across the yard. "You are back. 2.5 days. He picked up a cloth from the fence rail and wiped his hands. "How did it go?" "Sarah said it closes the case." Something in his posture shifted, a small settling, as if he had been holding something slightly tensed and had now released it. "Good." She walked into the yard. The torchlight was warmer here than the library lamps, lower and more orange, and it caught the angles of his face differently. He was still breathing slightly elevated from the training, and there was something in this that she found she noticed more than she intended to. "You were worried," she said. "I was aware of the variables. That is the same thing." The corner of his mouth moved. Perhaps. She stood a few feet from him, which was closer than the library table had put them, and the air between them was the same as it had been for 9 or 10 evenings now, charged in a way she had stopped pretending she didn't notice. "Sarah said I'm useful," she said. "You are." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you needed to hear from her?" "It is what I expected to need to hear." She paused. "It turned out to matter less than I expected." He watched her. What mattered more? She looked at him directly. She had been doing this for days now, this slow incremental practice of saying true things without covering them, and it still required something from her, an active choice each time. "Coming back," she said. The part where I came back mattered more than whether it was useful. The yard was quiet around them. One of the torches made a sound in the wind. Reese looked at her with the total attention she had grown accustomed to over weeks of evenings, the attention that did not divide or deflect, that took her in completely and gave her back nothing but presence. "Kale," he said. "Yes, I would like to ask you something." "All right, when this is finished," he said carefully, "when the case is closed and the consortium is addressed, and the things that need to be dealt with are dealt with, what do you want? For yourself. Not for the work. Not for the outcome. For you." She stood in the torchlit yard with her hands at her sides and looked at the Alpha King of the Northern Realm, the man she had come here to kill and had instead spent weeks talking to in a library, the man who had found out what had been done to her and said I might be able to help without conditions, the man who had said come back like it was simple. She thought about what she wanted. She thought about it seriously, the way she had started thinking about things seriously when they deserved it, which was new and still slightly uncomfortable, and also, she was finding, essential. "I want a fixed place," she said. "Not necessarily forever, but for a while. A place where I know the smells, where I know where things are in the dark." She paused. "I want to know what happens next. Not just the next day. Further than that." He was quiet for a moment. "That is available here," he said. She looked at him. "I am not pressuring you toward a specific shape of it," he said. "I am telling you that if you want to stay, there is room. There is a function that is real and useful. There is." He paused, briefly, and she saw him choose the next word deliberately. "There is a person here who would like you to stay. Apart from the function." She breathed out slowly. "I came here to kill you," she said, for what she thought might be the last time she needed to say it. "I know. And instead, I'm standing in your training yard at night and you are asking me what I want." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. The torchlight. The pale gold eyes that never stopped paying attention. The man who had poured tea and left silences and asked questions and given her documentation about the people who had destroyed everything she had been, not as an exchange, but because she deserved to know. She took one step forward, which closed the remaining distance between them. She felt his wolf then, in the way she had started to feel it over weeks of proximity, not as a threat but as a presence, large and steady, circling the edge of things with patient attention. She felt her own response to it, something she had no wolf word for because she was not a shifter, but that operated similarly, a recognition, a settling. "All right," she said. He looked at her. "All right, you will stay. All right to the whole thing." She held his gaze. "All of it, whatever that ends up being." He reached out and his hand found hers, the one with the faint calluses from years of knife work, and his fingers closed around it the same way she had imagined other hands held things, the way you hold something you are not planning to put down. "Whatever it ends up being," he agreed. Above them, the mountain sky was enormous and black and very full of stars. The council session that brought down the Brennan Consortium happened on a gray morning 3 weeks later when the first snow of the season was finding the gaps in the upper windows and melting against the warm stone floors. Kyle sat in the gallery above the great hall, which was not the council floor, which was intentional. Sarah had suggested it, and she had agreed. Not out of uncertainty about her standing, but out of understanding that the evidence should speak first, and evidence presented by a person whose history was complicated needed to be received before that person was introduced in full. She watched Sarah work. She was extraordinary, methodical, precise, relentlessly calm. She laid out the documentation in layers, beginning with the financial structure and building toward the operational records, letting each piece establish the next, so that by the time she placed Kael's ledger on the council table, the council had already been walked through every connecting piece, and the ledger completed a picture they had already partly seen. The 3 family representatives were present. They had been summoned for a council session described in neutral terms, which was another of Sarah's choices, and they sat at the council table with the specific expression of people who are not yet certain how much trouble they are in. By the end of the first hour, they knew. One of them, the oldest of the Brennan family's representatives, an angular woman named Sarette Brennan, who had the posture of someone accustomed to controlling rooms, tried twice to introduce alternative interpretations of the documentation. Sarah dismantled both attempts with the particular efficiency of someone who had anticipated them. Kyle watched and noted the specific techniques, because she was still learning Sarah, still mapping her, and Sarah was worth mapping carefully. Reese sat at the head of the council table and said very little. He asked 4 questions, each placed at precisely the right moment to either open something that needed opening or close something that was trying to stay open. Kyle watched him work the room the way she had watched him in the library, this same quality of presence and precision applied to a different context. She had known he was powerful. She was now watching what that meant in practical terms. By midday, the formal findings were being drafted. She came down from the gallery when Sarah sent for her, which happened after the Brennan representatives had been escorted out and before the council members who remained had dispersed. She walked into the great hall and felt every remaining pair of eyes in the room find her, the quick inventory that happened whenever she entered a space. Reese looked at her from the head of the table. He did not change his expression, but something in it settled, the way a room settles when something it was waiting for arrives. Sarah stood beside him. Kyle provided the foundational documentation that completed this case. Sarah said to the room, in the tone of someone stating information rather than advocating a position. She has been operating as an intelligence asset for this office for the past 3 weeks. A council member near the end of the table, a solid alpha with gray at his temples, said, "Where did she come from?" "Eastern Lowlands originally," Sarah said. "She has been working in private intelligence networks." "Which ones?" "The ones that were funding this consortium's operational layer," Sarah said, without inflection. "She extracted herself from that network and brought the documentation to us." A pause. The council member looked at Kyle with the expression of someone updating a calculation. "Why?" he said. "The Brennan family funded the destruction of her village 6 years ago," Sarah said. She had personal motivation to see this resolved. A longer pause. "The room understood the shape of this," Reese said. "She is staying." Just those 3 words, said with the particular even weight he put on things that were not up for discussion. "Her position will be formalized through Sarah's office. If anyone has questions about her standing, they can raise them with me directly. No one raised them." After the council dispersed, Kyle found herself in the corridor outside the Great Hall with Sarah, who was reviewing her notes and did not look up. "You did well up there," Kyle said. "I know." Sarah turned a page. "The Brennan case will go to formal hearing within a month. Your documentation will be entered as evidence. You will likely need to provide a statement. Under what name? Whatever name you choose to use going forward." Sarah looked up briefly. "I would suggest one that you own. Not the one a handler gave you." Kyle thought about this. She had been Kyle for 6 years. The name had served her. It belonged to the version of herself that had been shaped by her handler, and she was becoming, slowly and with effort, a different version, one that was perhaps in need of a different name. She thought about the river, the eastern lowlands, the smell of mud and summer water. Her mother had called her something, the real name, the one from before. She had not used it in 6 years because it had felt like something too soft to carry through the kind of years she had been carrying. She was not sure she was still afraid of soft things. "I will think about it," she said. Sarah nodded, the brisk nod of someone who considers this a settled matter for now, and moved on down the corridor with her papers. Kyle stood in the corridor alone for a moment. The gray light came through the tall windows at the end of the hall, the diffuse flat light of snow cloud, and it made everything in the palace look quieter and more internal, turned in on itself against the cold. She thought about the morning her village burned, and the way she had stood in the river with her shoes in her hand and walked east and kept walking. She thought about 9 nights of tea in a library. She thought about what it felt like to walk through the main door. The snow settled properly over the northern capital that evening, the first real accumulation of the season, and by nightfall the carved staircases were white, and the lower tiers of the city were quiet beneath it. Kyle stood at the window of her room on the intelligence corridor and watched it fall. There was a particular quality to snow in the mountains that she had not encountered before coming here, heavier than the lowland snow she had known as a child, more deliberate, each flake carrying more weight. It settled with intention. She had been in this room for 3 weeks. She knew where things were in the dark. There was a knock at the door. Reese came in when she said to, which he had been doing since the first week, knocking first, not assuming, which was something she had not expected from an Alpha King, and which she had observed with the same careful attention she gave everything. He had a habit of sitting on the windowsill when he came to talk, one leg up, the other on the floor, and he did this now, looking out at the snow. "The formal hearing is set for the 22nd, he said. "Sarah told me, you will need to be present." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the snow continued its deliberate descent. "I have been thinking about names," she said. He looked at her. "My handler gave me KL when I was 17. It was functional. It fit the work." She paused. "I had a name before that. My family used it." She said the name. The real one. The Eastern Lowland name with its particular vowel sounds that sat differently in the mouth than Northern names, softer, longer. Reese said it back to her. Once, carefully, getting the sounds right. Something happened in her chest when he said it. Small and significant. "That is a better name for you," he said, "not because of what you are now, because it sounds like something that was always true." She looked at him on the windowsill with the snow falling outside and thought about the 11 evenings in the library that had become this, whatever this was, This room and this city and this person who had smelled her fear through a stone wall and said, "Try again tomorrow," instead of anything else. "I want to ask you something," she said. "All right." That night in the library. The first night, when you knew I was in the passage, and you knew I was frightened, and you knew I was not going to do anything. She paused. "Why didn't you call the guards?" He thought about this, not performing the thinking, actually doing it the way he did everything. "Because you were afraid," he said, "and calling the guards would have made that worse and gained me nothing. Whatever was making you hesitate was more useful than anything the guards could do." He looked at her. "And because there are very few people who come through that wall and then sit in the dark for 20 minutes without moving, and I found that I wanted to know which kind of person you were." She looked at him. "Which kind am I? The kind who makes a decision and then makes a different one." He held her gaze. "The kind who keeps what they know until they find something worth giving it for." A pause. "The kind who knocks." She absorbed this. The snow was falling thick now, the kind of fall that changes the sound of the city, absorbs it, wraps everything in a particular soft silence. She thought about what it would mean to be a person who kept making different decisions, who kept walking through main doors, who told people their true name. "I would like to stay," she said. "Properly, not just because it is useful." She met his eyes. "Because I want to be here. That is a different reason." "It is," he agreed. "I have not done things for that reason in a long time." "I know." She moved toward the window, toward him, and he turned to face her, sliding off the windowsill to stand, and they were close in the way the library table had never quite allowed, close enough that she could feel the warmth that came off him, the specific warmth of an alpha in winter. And she looked up at him and thought about all the words she had been slowly learning to say. "The consortium destroyed my village," she said. "And then they made me into a weapon. And then they pointed me at you." She paused, "And you turned out to be the thing that made it worth surviving." He reached up and put his hand against her face, the way someone touches something they are being careful with. "I am going to say something," he said, "and I want you to know that it is not a pressure or a claim. It is just a true thing that I want you to have. Say it." "You are the most interesting person I have been in a room with in 11 years. And I have been in rooms with a significant number of people." His thumb moved slightly. "Whatever you want this to be, I want it too. Whatever name you call it." She thought about the river and the summer and the smooth stones her brother had collected. She thought about 9 nights of tea. She thought about the first time she had walked through the main door instead of the passage in the wall, the small and enormous decision of that. She put her hand over his, the one on her face. "I think," she said, "that I am done trying to do things that are not what I actually want to do." Something changed in his expression, warm and careful and very still. "What do you want to do?" he said quietly. She told him, not with words, because some things were more honest than words, and she had spent enough years communicating through action to know that this was one of those things. She told him the way she had learned to tell true things, directly and without covering it. Outside, the snow fell on the mountain city and the carved staircases and the torchlit corridors and the library with the reading table and the 2 chairs and the cup she had drunk from for 9 evenings. It fell on the lower tiers and the market corridors and the hollow stone she had stopped checking. It covered things over, the way snow does. And what it covered became quieter, and what remained above it became clearer by contrast. More itself, the essential shapes of things. Inside the room on the intelligence corridor, the fire burned steadily, and the Alpha King of the Northern Realm stood with his hand against the face of the woman who had come here to kill him, and had made a different choice, and kept making it, and would keep making it. He pressed his mouth to her forehead first. Just that. She closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of him through every point of contact, his hand on her face, his other hand finding her waist. The solidness of him, the absolute reliable reality of this particular person in this particular room. She thought about the word home, about what it required, about whether it was a place or a set of conditions, or something else entirely, something that was not fixed in geography but in the quality of attention, in what it felt like to be known. She thought she might be beginning to understand. She breathed in pine resin and cold air and the particular scent she had learned to associate with him, with safety, with evenings that stretched long and easy and full of pages turning. "Reese," she said. "Yes, I came back." His arms came around her. "I know," he said against her hair. "I was counting." Outside, the snow continued to fall, heavy and deliberate and permanent, and the northern city settled into white, and in the morning everything would look like it had always been this way, like this was simply the shape of the world. The assassin and the king and the library between them, and all the doors she had learned to walk through. She had come here with a blade and a fear she couldn't name. She was leaving something else behind, not the work, not the skill, not the careful, watchful intelligence she had built in 6 hard years. Those were hers. Genuinely hers in a way the work itself had never been. She was leaving behind the version of herself that had believed she was only what her handler had made her, only the name he had given her, only the narrow lane of use he had assigned. She pressed her face into the warmth of his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and real, and let the rest of it settle around her like the snow, like weight and silence, and the beginning of something new. She had tried again tomorrow. And the tomorrow after that, and every tomorrow had led here, to this room, to this warmth, to the extraordinary, ordinary fact of a person who had counted the nights she came back. She thought that was probably enough. She thought that was, in fact, everything,